Hello, my name is Rajan Arora and welcome to my course Essentials of SQL Server Performance for Every Developer. You are watching the video of Module 5 capturing what your application is doing inside SQL Server, Part 2 Setting up of SQL Profiler trace. If you are new to this course, please start it from the course introduction video for better understanding. Thank you. To run SQL Profiler, you have to go to your Microsoft SQL Server tools in your Start menu. Here, you can see on Must Install, it is labeled SQL Server Profiler 18 and you just click on this icon. You can also start SQL Server Profiler from SQL Server Management Studio. For that, click on Tools menu. Then the first menu is SQL Server Profiler. Once you click on the SQL Server Profiler menu, the app will open and this is what the screen will look like. You want to go up here to the left upper corner and click on the icon that is all the way on the left to start a new trace. Then as we see here, we have a login dialog box pop up and what we need to do here is to log in to the SQL Server instance where we want to run the SQL trace on. Also, we need to log into SQL Server as a user that has the altered trace permission. Otherwise, when we click connect, here we are going to get an error. In this case, I am just running a trace on my local SQL Server instance, so I will have a permission to do this. But as we talked about in the intro of the module, you may or may not have rights to run a trace against different SQL Server at your company. So, I will click connect here and then we will present it with this dialog box where we can specify the various options for the trace that we are going to perform. So, first we will specify a name and then we don't have to specify an output file where we want this data to go. But it's generally a good idea so you can review the data later. So we are going to check this box to save to a file and we will specify a file name here. And then we get this option to specify a maximum file size, which I am going to set 25 MB. Then I also want to make sure that file rollover is set. So as these files fill up profiler with roll them over to a new file. Now, what I want to do is to set the events I want to capture and some filter criteria about what to capture. And I do that on this second tab called Event Selection. You can see we already have some defaults selected. And from a developer perspective, wanting to trace some SQL statements and get their performance information. These are actually some pretty good defaults. These names are pretty self-explanatory. But if you mouse over one of them, you do get some additional description down here in the lower part of the dialog. The RPC completed event will fire when a stored procedure completes, and the SQL batch complete event fires when an individual statement completes. So you want to make sure to have both of these events checked so you can capture all the SQL from your application. This is important even if you are not using stored procedure explicitly, because the way that some of the database drivers work, they actually in some cases will wrap your SQL inside of the SP execute SQL built-in procedure. So you just want to make sure that both of these boxes are checked. Also, you want to make sure to check the box labeled text data here on RPC completed, because this is what is going to let us see the SQL that's being executed as part of that event. If you can see that we have a number of other parameters here like CPU and logical reads, and I suggest you to leave all of this checked so you get this performance information. Now there are many other events that you can capture, and to see all of these events you check this box here named show all events. As you can see, this list is quite extensive, though most of the items in this list are of more interest to DBAs than to us as developers. I am not going to go through each and every one of these, obviously, but there is one that I want to point out, and that is in the error and warnings section. And the event name is user error messages. If you have a SQL statement in your application that throws an error when it runs, that error will be captured by this event. So this can be useful debugging tool if that error isn't otherwise getting bubbled up to your application logs. This event will also log some informational messages that SQL Server generates. But for our purposes, we can disregard those informational messages, because what we are really interested in for this event is the ability to capture errors from our SQL statements. I am going to uncheck the show all events checkbox, and you see this gets up back to just the event that we are going to capture. And now we want to talk about this other button here, column filters. The way we have things right now, we are going to capture every login, logout and SQL statements that executed across the entire SQL Server instance. If you are running a trace against your local install of SQL Server, that will probably work fine because you are probably the only user. But on a busy server, you are going to capture a lot of events that you don't care about. This not only makes it harder to sort through all of the data and find what is important to you, but it can also have a negative impact on the performance of SQL Server because you are capturing so many events. So we want to filter the data so that we just capturing the data that's of interest to us. One of the things you probably want to do is to limit the data you collect to just your application. You can do this using the application name filter or by the login name filter. Assuming that your application uses a unique login for SQL Server. If you go to the application name root, remember you need to set this application name in the connection string your application uses. In .NET, this is done by including the application name parameter in the connection string, and something similar can be done in other languages as well. You can also limit your trace to statements that takes a longer time or use a lot of resources with columns like duration, CPU or writes. To set one of these, just click on it and then go over here to the criteria you want to set. And in this case, I want queries that takes longer than 5 seconds, so that's 5000 milliseconds, and set the value. And now this trace would capture just this long running queries. If you want to get rid of this criteria, which I do for the demo that I am going to run in just a second here, then you just double click on the values so that you can edit the values and delete it. And now that criteria will not be used anymore. So now we have our trace set up, and in the next video, we will continue with this and go ahead and run this trace and collect some data. If you like this video, please do share, like and subscribe to my channel for more such videos. Thank you and see you in the next video.